friends in Parent Tween Village. We are back with Beth Sandlin, owner of Trifecta Pilates, which is an entirely virtual Pilates studio. And she and I actually are both in Colorado right now, as we discovered. Who knew? But we just had a really insightful conversation about the physical and mental health benefits of exercise. And she gave us some really good tips about how to get those incorporated. And so now we're going to chat more about how to get our kids involved. But one of the things that I noticed in her bio is that she's actually a cancer survivor, and she survived it at a pretty young age. And so I was like, hey, can we just kind of punt and talk about that for a minute and how that plays into her world? And then we're also going to talk about how to enroll our kids as well. So we'll just take a little bit of a detour on that. So Beth, first of all, welcome back and thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me again. I'm really happy to share a little bit deeper dive into our conversation that we already started, but would love to share more about my cancer journey in brief. So in our last conversation, I shared how when I was in college, I was walking up that flight of stairs and I realized I better get to the gym so that I can do the activities I want to try, like hiking. What I didn't share was about a year later, I was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. That was at the age of 20. And so I had to drop out of college for about a semester. And then once I was in full remission, had about 2 years of continued treatment. And during the very intensive treatment that I experienced, I lost an incredible amount of weight, not in a good way, which is why I'm pretty sensitive to weight loss should not always be our goal when we're working out, because we can have a negative experience when it comes to weight loss. And that's what I experienced,
Sure.
where it really decreased my energy. My muscle mass was gone. Like when I went back into the gym to try to work out, I went down to do a push-up and I just stayed down, could not even come back up. But what was even worse was I was holding my nephew, who was about a year old, and I just started shaking and sweating, and I physically could not hold him. My older sister turned to me and said, "Do you want me to take him back?" And I had to give him back to her because I just did not have the physical strength and stamina. And that's really my reason why moving my body and working out is so important, is because at that very young age, I recognized if I can't feel good and have enough energy to do basic activities, well, that's not going to be helpful for me. And I'm not going to be able to be there for my family in the way that I want to be. And when my kiddos were teeny tiny, it was like chasing them around at the park and having enough energy for that. Now that they're older, we love to hike as a family. So going on hikes or just having these really long days, is that working out consistently helps with that physical aspect. And also, as we talked about in the last show, if you want to call it that,
Right.
the emotional regulation, the mental health. So it really has integrated over the years to be a foundational aspect of my life and for my overall family.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. I had thought about that when I first was, inviting you to participate, and then completely forgot during the first portion of our conversation. So thanks for taking some time. So your kids, can I ask you how old your kids are now?
They are, well, I have one turning 18 this week, an adult child. That's like a huge thing for me. I'm like,
That's a huge milestone.
and then my other one is 15. So we are in the process right now of learning how to drive. It is probably one of the least favorite aspects of being a parent. Like, I teach Pilates much better than I teach the skills of driving. It's just nerve-wracking doing that.
Absolutely. So you're speaking from personal experience when we talk about the impacts of exercising, and number one, being a role model for healthy habits, but then number two, also enrolling them in the process with you. So how have you seen that role modeling show up, and what examples can you give, or recommendations can you give to parents to recognize and implement or understand the idea of the role model that they are for their kids in this realm?
Yes, the role modeling aspect is huge. And I think why I lean into this even more so is because I'm also have a degree in health education. And for a few years, I was a tobacco cessation coach. And what the research studies show when it comes to tobacco, and this is a little side note that I hope is helpful. Parents can tell their kids not to smoke, not to smoke, not to smoke, but if they grow up in a family where their parents smoke, they are more prone to smoke.
Sure.
And so I realized, okay, well, we can tell our kids to exercise and live healthy, but if we aren't demonstrating that and
Mhm.
sometimes putting ourselves first, that they most likely are not going to understand how to navigate that. And we talked about in the
Mhm.
last show the flexibility that we have. And so it's this balance for my family of carving out time for ourselves as individuals to work out and also being adaptable, to their
Mhm.
schedules. Okay, well, today's going to be a shorter day. I recommended on the last show, like just start with 10 minutes. Right now, for the most part, I do longer length workouts. I've built up my energy and my time for that as well. But sometimes I will do a 10-minute evening routine because that's what fits into my day. And I'm
Sure.
okay with that. And I think modeling that for our children, that it's consistent and we're not going to have a very rigid plan, is what's really going to set them up for success.
Absolutely. And I was saying to you before you and I started chatting, started our first conversation, that I didn't have that modeled for me, and trying to find ways to incorporate movement into my life as an adult, especially because I wasn't an athlete. It's been a whole lot harder. What's your take for families who say, okay, but I don't necessarily need to do the modeling as much because my kids are athletes, my kids are in sports, they're active. They don't need me to model that for them in order for them to be active.
I think it goes to what kids are seeing as what an adult looks like. So if we are only ever taking them to their sports activities and it's centered around what they're doing, they're also not seeing us of how we are integrating that healthy lifestyle when we are adults. And what I always think of, even when they were toddlers, I am trying to support them where they are now and setting them up for hopefully success in the future.
Hmm.
And so they're going to grow up beyond the sport that they're playing. We know most athletes in high school, for instance, are not going to go on and play in college, and are even less likely to play professionally. And so,
Right.
how do we then manage that if we aren't a professional athlete, and most of us aren't? How do
Right.
we
Exactly.
manage a more realistic workout program, because that is going to most likely be their reality, and
Hmm.
that's what I like to lean into. And also, once we get into that rhythm of movement, the number one thing people start to experience and let me know is, I just feel so much better. And for
Hmm.
so often, the narrative, and especially when we were growing up, was like, you work out to look better. And it's a
Hmm.
different shift where I'm working out just to overall feel
Feel better.
better in my
Right.
body. And we know, you mentioned that you're in your 40s, I'm in my 40s as well. We know if we don't work out, there's a whole bunch of physical declines that come with age. And so often people are like, I'm getting older, and that's why I'm not strong, and why, my posture is slouching, and all these other things, decreased bone
Mhm.
density, muscular mass, balance goes over the course of time. And what the research shows is it's not age, it's just that we aren't doing the activities that we maybe did even in high school. So
Mhm.
think back to, even if you didn't enjoy physical activity in high school, and I'm going to raise my hand there with that, we were most likely in a PE class of some sort, and we were doing things on a more consistent basis that sometimes we tend to filter out, especially for those of us who have experienced more sedentary jobs, like working 40 hours a week and being in front of the computer for long periods of times, or not even sedentary jobs, very repetitive
Sure.
jobs, that don't give us the diversity of movement that our body really appreciates.
Right. So one of the things that I hear a lot from parents is, my kids get stuck behind the devices. I can't get them out from, I can't get them away from Minecraft. I can't get them away from YouTube. I can't get them away from their phone or the computer or the television or whatever all. And I know that you've got some insight for families about how to get kids to move with you. So where do we start with that?
There's a few options with this, and one you had mentioned that you have dogs. I have a dog as well. If you have an animal that likes to walk outside, even cats sometimes like to walk outside, use that as, I'm taking the dog for a walk. You want to come with me? Rhea would really love you to come with us on a walk. And sometimes it's just that gentle encouragement. They may not take us up on that first time around, but maybe a little bit later in the week or later in the month. We have to allow for that autonomy as well. I also encourage people to focus on what are they hearing their kids say that they like to do or would like to try. As an example, I just found out that my oldest really wanted to try an aerial silks class. I had no idea whatsoever. It came up in conversation that this used to be a class that was available at their high school and is no longer. And she made the
Wow.
call, oh my gosh, I totally would have signed up for that class. So for her birthday coming up, that's actually going to be part of her birthday. We are going to take an aerial silks class together. Who knows if she's going to like it? Who knows if I'm going to like it? But I want her to know that we can at least try something and see how it lands. So we're going to be trying that. If it's shooting hoops, playing basketball, or going outside and playing soccer, whatever it may be, lean into what they enjoy is really helpful. And then they might be more willing to maybe try something that they haven't tried in the past.
What about folks who are like, oh, like the aerial silks class sounds really cool, but I don't necessarily have the money for it, or that isn't in my area, or things that they'd be interested in aren't necessarily here. What are some other ways that we can, I mean, okay, obviously, like, follow what they're interested in. I mean, there's pretty much a basketball court in any town, somewhere at a rec center or something like that. Do you recommend ever saying to your kid, or can there be value in saying, you know what, I'm recognizing that my mental health could really benefit from more movement, and I'd really like to have like a mother-daughter date once a week. Can we make a commitment to going for a walk once a week for 15 minutes? Do you think something like that on the front end could help?
Yes, 100%. That sometimes I even go as far as, if your child, maybe let's give two scenarios. One is your child really likes sports, but they only really like that one sport. Like there's some kids who it's like that's their specialty and they don't want to do anything beyond that. Is we can lean into, well, this other type of workouts, walking, running, stretching, strength training, whatever it may be, is really good for cross training. And that's, research has shown that cross training for athletic sports is really beneficial. It's helps the body recover and prepare it for the next season as well. So that can be done more in like off season time period. For people who maybe do not like physical activity whatsoever. And one of my mentors in college, who her profession was physical movement. She was a Pilates teacher. Like it was her life's path, like mine, to incorporate movement and teach movement. And her son really did not like moving at all. And she had to just have a conversation with him that this is actually really important. I know you love playing video games, but it's necessary for your body to get physical activity throughout the day. So whether they do that on their own or like you're suggesting, like let's have some time together where we're walking and get some suggestions. Well, what do they want to try? Is it walking? Is it maybe going on a bike ride on a trail if you live where it snows, because it's about to snow here tomorrow, perhaps in Colorado? It's, getting some snowshoes and trying that. So there's a lot of different options, and just see what is kind of that shared option that your kids and you want to try, and just give it a go. And another thing that we've done in the past is, I really like giving the gift of presents when I'm giving things, which is one of the reasons why we're doing an aerial silks class. It's like an experience together. as a
Hmm.
birthday gift. But we've also in the past done like, okay, we're going to go on some hikes that we have wanted to try, or we're going to explore different areas of our state that you
Hmm.
all know that the state you live in sometimes is the state that you explore the least
Sure,
because
absolutely.
it's just like we want to get away. Well, let's get
Yep.
away in our own region. Where are the areas that you can explore? Maybe it's downtown walking, or I know that there's like bike rides here in downtown Denver, tours that you can go on if maybe you don't have your own bikes, or just walking along the Platte River. There's so many options. So it's finding that coming together of what's going to best serve you and your family.
One of the things that is coming up in my brain at this point, a suggestion that I've often offered to families is, like they'll wake up on a Saturday, they realize they actually have a day free from all the things, and they're kind of like, well, what do we do now? Right? And so maybe having like a jar of ideas of, oh, I'd like to take an aerial class, and that goes in the jar, or I want to try rock climbing, and that goes in the jar, or I want to try snowshoeing, that goes in the jar. And then depending on the circumstances, like, yeah, we're about to get dumped on, it sounds like, right? Oh, hey, there's probably going to be some pretty good powder on the weekend. Maybe it's a good weekend to try cross country skiing. It's something that we've wanted to try, and now the conditions are actually good for it. And so to come up with those ideas in advance so that when the circumstance presents itself, you've already got the ideas created, or like, what the circumstance is going to be. Like, clearly we need snow in order to go snowshoeing, or whatever the case may be, having those in advance. And I think that's a great way, to your point, of find out what they're interested in. If they get involved in it, then if it's their idea, they're going to be more likely to want to participate. Like, that's just human nature.
100%. And going back again to having a conversation before you want to do the activity, I found with tweens and teenagers, we need to tell them like sometimes weeks in advance that we would like to do this. So your jar of activities, doing that as an activity in and of itself that maybe you can add to when you hear what they're saying. So it's not
Mhm.
just, oh, we have a free Saturday, let's go on a hike. And it's the first time maybe we've ever brought that up to them. Many times they're resistant to that new because it impacts their day. And so as
Sure.
an example, we have spring break next week, and I was talking today with my kids about what our spring break plans are. Like, oh, do you want to try this or do this activity, go down to the
Mhm.
zoo? And even going to the zoo and walking
Mhm.
around for the majority of the day is still physical activity together. It's like a
Sure.
disguise of how we're doing physical activity. We don't think about
Sure.
that often, but it's going to be an amazing experience. I've noticed they like to know in advance and have some say in, oh yeah, I want to do that,
Sure.
or I'd rather do something a little bit different.
Mhm. Well, and one of the things that I've found over the years in working with families is when we can get the kids away from the technology, for sure, right? Um, we could have digital detox conversations all day long. But when we're in an environment where we're side to side with somebody that we're mentoring, which in a lot of cases is the role that a parent plays as the kids age into these older teenage years, right? Like, you're not the autocrat that you were when your kids were 5 and 8. You're much more the guide and the mentor at this point. But when we can be side to side with them, it almost like psychologically creates like an us versus the world perspective for them, that as things are coming up, they start talking. It's not confrontational, because so many of us, like, just from a pure mammalian response, when we're face to face with somebody, it can elicit a confrontational engagement, which we don't even necessarily intend. But if we can put it side to side, then it becomes more collaborative and more, I'm here to help you, I'm on your team mentality, which you don't necessarily get when you're, if you're not in that side to side environment. There's something about that, like, shoulder to shoulder experience for the kids.
And that's actually one of the reasons why when my kids made that transition from being younger to, I don't know what the younger age is between like toddler and tweens, what that's really identified as. But
Sure.
once I started realizing they're going through shifts and they no longer were comfortable with that face-to-face conversation, as you were saying, I did read a book about the different types of communicators. Like some people like that face-to-face, and for a lot of people, and especially tweens and teenagers, the side conversation, exactly like you're saying, feels less confrontational. And sometimes in a car, we can't do that because they are plugged into their device. And that's one of the things that I really noticed on just a walk around our neighborhood, that my kids were having conversations with me in a much different way they were anywhere else. So this wasn't even like, we're going to go to an aerial silks class or we're going to go on an all-day hike. This was a 20-minute walk around the neighborhood. We're going with their dog. It's pretty low key. And so not only is it just physical activity for the day, which is amazing, getting more steps in, but we're able to connect with them on such a different level, which is really nice for them to see that we don't, sometimes we get stuck in this trap, I feel like, as parents. They're coming to us only when they need help, or they feel like we're only talking to them. Are you getting your stuff ready for school? Did you meet that deadline? I got this email from your teacher. Like it gets to be very transactional almost, rather than just getting to know who they are and their experience.
I love it. We could talk all day, but I think we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I appreciate the time that you've given us, the knowledge that you've given us, and some insights as to how to help families get their kids more active. Number one, as you said, by demonstrating it yourself as the adult and demonstrating how important it is, but then also ways to engage them, invite them to do things, give them advanced warning. My goodness, my yawns won't stop this morning. Giving them some advanced warning, and then just some different ideas of activities that we can do that count as movement. And I love that the underlying theme here, Beth, is that it's simply movement. It doesn't have to be exercise. It doesn't have to be the gym. It's let's get out and do something together. Dude, even the driving range. My husband and I went to the driving range on Saturday because I just said to him, I spend so much time inside and so much time at my desk. I was like, I just want fresh air and sunshine. And we went to the driving range. It was like $20 for a bucket of balls. It was cheap, but it was outside movement and it was together time and it was time to just be, which I think a lot of people don't necessarily prioritize that in their families, whether it's their partnerships or their kids. So thank you for the ideas. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to come on and hopefully gets people moving.
Absolutely. And by the way, where can people find you?
You can find me at trifectapilates.com. I do have a YouTube channel, and just like you're experiencing here, there's a YouTube option, and then there's also an app, which makes it just even more convenient to find the classes that you enjoy moving with.
Awesome. All right, everybody, if you've got questions and you'd like to check out any of Beth's classes or connect with her, you can find her at trifectapilates.com, as she said, or you can always reach out to me and I can connect you as well. So thank you, Beth.
Thanks so much, Clarissa.